Welcome to the Masters of Resilience podcast. This show is an exploration of the unseen and unheard stories of adversity that shape the journeys of high performers. These conversations will help you better understand the mindset, habits, and behaviors that empower these exceptional leaders to endure the most challenging moments of their careers and emerge stronger than ever. Your hosts are Ryan Seeger and Mark Phillips. Let's dive in to more.
Welcome back to Masters of Resilience, where we explore what it takes to navigate adversity, build strength, and lead with purpose. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Rusty Bland, the president of the KeHE Cares Foundation. At KeHE Cares, they use their 3 pillars of care: serving and giving, impact investing, and the KeHE Leadership Academy to see those in marginalized situations experience abundant life. Rusty is a leader who believes that great organizations are not built by controlling people, but rather by unlocking their potential. At KeHE, he has played a key role in shaping the company's culture, embedding purpose into leadership development, and ensuring that business success is deeply tied to social impact. Through KeHE Cares, he leads efforts to serve communities in meaningful ways, bringing dignity, grace, and justice to those in need. In today's conversation, we dive into Rusty's philosophy on resilient leadership, the identity crisis that changed his life, and the bitterness of gaining wisdom through experience. We really enjoyed the conversation, and we know you will too. Let's dive into more. Rusty, welcome to the Masters of Resilience podcast. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Grateful to be here.
That's wonderful. I'm excited for our conversation, and I think to kick us off, I just want to start with a question really around adversity and resilience. Can you share a time either at KeHE or even in your own personal life where you experienced a moment of real adversity? What did the experience teach you about building resilience, both individually or professionally? We'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think we could easily just burn through an hour, trying to either look at the biblical perspective on how do you experience abundant life or flourishing, or these definitions that we're really using right now in the marketplace in nonprofit spaces. And I know for me, I started out, if you will, kind of my first kind of main job was working for my father-in-law in a Christian retailing business. I ended up working for him for 15 years and was a co-owner at the end. We had about 75 units across the U.S. And I thought I was going to be doing that for the rest of my life, really. And now you look back and think about, well, where do we buy, books, or how do we experience music, or any of these kind of things that we sold and depended on, if you will. And so, of course, that was massively disruptive many times, actually, now that those segments. But I find myself at 40 years old, and the business had failed. I had put in a lot of personal funds to keep it afloat at the end, to make payroll, that kind of thing. And really kind of looking at this, okay, God, I thought you called me here for the duration, prepped me for this. This was uniquely experienced, and my ministry, if you will, and job kind of rolled into one. And then suddenly I'm in that midlife zone with a mortgage and 3 kids, and I'm looking for what am I supposed to do? So just what I realized, as I was kind of contemplating this failure, did I get my call wrong, or was it me? Was God not pleased with how I was behaving?
Right.
Some of these really questions that I look now and think theologically, no. I mean, I can't earn his love any more than it is right now, and I'm not going to be able to perform myself out of it. But I recognized, and I was now looking back, I had an identity problem, that my identity of who I was and who God made me to be was really linked and overlapped with my job and my success and my title, my performance, all of this in kind of the marketplace, if you will. And so that confusion with assignment versus like missional calling took a while to unravel. And so I did find myself at KeHE, where I've been for 20 plus years now. And ironically, I kind of joke that I went from selling the NIV Bible to specialty tea, so NIV to specialty tea is like, what? Like, how do you get there? How do you find that? And not to bore you with kind of the job transition, but it was definitely a God thing. And he had me in a season that he made it really clear that the word for me in the season was humility. And I didn't like that word at the time. Like, I want the word launch, God. How about that word? Or,
Right.
like, give me a double portion. How's that? I wanted that word, but, and again, you kind of retrospect now, looking back, I went from what I felt like the frying pan to the fire, because the first 4 years at KeHE were desert years. I missed the kind of the environment and the camaraderie and the gospel mission that I felt in the work that I was doing. And then here I was, in the grocery industry, and I liked it, but it just didn't feel missional. And it felt KeHE was a rough time. It just was not a great culture at that time. It was a culture that was more toxic. And I just, you start kind of going, is it me? Like, am I the problem? Because I thought clearly you called me here. But what's required, C.S. Lewis says, that God shouts to us in our suffering, that we just I don't give the attention, that God deserves, that the creator of all things, who makes himself available to us on a moment to moment basis. And I just kind of stuff him into these little, leftover moments of my day. How ridiculous just conceptually is that? And I think, for me, the suffering and the kind of undoing, if you will, of my identity, unwrapping of my identity, and reforming it, was just really, really a big deal that I didn't even know at the time how much that was going to be called on later as these things started to happen at KeHE, that were, explosive growth and all this attention on our culture and these opportunities for us to do some really unique things. And what I would call God pouring out new wine. I feel like he's done things at KeHE that I haven't seen done elsewhere quite in that way. And I know many of us have that, same experience, that God's always pouring out new wine. The Spirit is, and his mercies are new every day. And so there is that sense of co-creating that's happening all the time. But I see now the preparation for me, during that transition of losing a business, losing something I loved, and really then kind of deconstructing my identity. And then through 4 desert years at KeHE, where I just felt like a nobody. I felt like where I am in the desert. And then, just the sweetness of the Lord to really bless me and bless us in a way where he gets the glory. He's showing off, but he involves us in it, And so that was kind of that's the high level, if you will, of for me. And there's always things like personal loss or people that you lose in your life, and as you get older, just the struggles that dear ones that die, and that broken relationships, all of that. But I think from a career standpoint, that those were critical years for me.
And I'm going to dig into that, Rusty, but can you just touch on where you are today, the KeHE Cares Foundation? Talk a little bit about that and your role.
Sure. Yeah. So again, kind of only God could move someone who has, a marketing and business development background into an HR role. But here I am, 4 years into being at KeHE, and a group of us are praying one morning before work, and this older woman who was in an administrative role, in the company and no longer at KeHE, but she prays that God would move in HR. And I was in agreement. Yes, God, you'll move in HR. We need our culture and talent to be more about you. And at KeHE, we say we thank and honor God in all we do. And we're just like, that God, you would be honored by what's happening there. I was in full agreement. And then 2 hours later, I get called by Brandon Barnholt to come into his office, which I didn't report to him at the time. And I knew him, and we were chummy, but that was intimidating. The
And
CEO is
he was a CEO. Okay.
CEO's calling me into his office unexpectedly. I'm thinking, I'm getting fired. That
Oh,
literally
gosh.
that 3-minute walk I thought was kind of the gangplank or something. I was walking to my career end at KeHE for nothing I did. That's where my head went. And he asked me if I would take this new role that they were creating in HR. And again, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but the 2 hours removed from this prayer session, and just knowing how God is, that when we pray, and we pray for God to show up, that he sends his ambassadors, which is you and me. We're the ones that go. Okay, I'm going to move Rusty over to HR. And has felt very Gideon-like, very much like he has just moved in these powerful ways. And my assignment was obedience and availability. Is, go and yes, do all of the things competently as far as confidence and boldness and all the things that we are going to do just as his followers. But he just has moved over and over again. So ultimately, where that led me is a 15-year career in HR, and then I was co-head of HR for about 5 years, and EVP of culture. I was responsible for all the talent processes at KeHE, communications, really the employment brand part of what it means to work at KeHE. KeHE's a $9.5 billion food company in the food industry, grocery industry, 8,000 employees, 18 distribution centers across the U.S. So really got big during that run. Just really, really got, from my perspective, just it grew from 500 million to 9.5 and growing still rapidly. And so heading up culture and all that goes into that, and including the foundation. So I had that responsibility as well. Well, the foundation is stewarded with directing 10% of the net income of KeHE, and that number just has continued to grow. That job became one where it was an opportunity for that to be my job, and that really was a dream, and it is a dream. And so in May of 24. I left my HR role, moved off the senior team. I run the foundation. We have a separate board of directors, and it's a 501c3. We do 36 serving trips a year. Last year we made about 220 grants. We have a leadership academy that's engaging the marketplace right now to help other organizations go on that journey of serving and of giving and of wholeness in a more rapid way. And so it's just my honor to be running that and leading a team that I consider more of a ministry team at this point, embedded in a secular setting, in a secular organization, which has been really amazing.
That's awesome. Rusty, I'd love to rewind a little bit on your identity comment. And what did you do when you're in kind of that questioning your identity and the desert moment, so to speak? What were some of the things that you did to rebuild that identity, and what did that look like?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I want to be, you just really, like, God gets 100% of the credit. And what I have found most effective in my journey are the things that are unasked for, where God just says, I'm going to put you here, and, you're going to be in the desert. And so what does it mean to then be and follow me and rejoice in me? And so in many ways, it's the simplicity of just, as the writer of Hebrews says, like that we gaze, we fix our eyes. It's in Psalms where it's like I gazing upon him in his sanctuary, and how his love is better than life, and just this sense of as like Francis Chan would quote Tozer, like the most important thing about you is what you think of God, and kind of understanding his love and understanding him as this loving father, this shepherd, or having some other view that ends up, kind of diminishing God or not painting him accurately. So for me, it was kind of being in this place, having this loss, and then having kind of day-to-day turmoil on the job at KeHE, and having kind of repeated situations where I was being pushed down, kind of like just held down by other people or by situations, and just really kind of needing to let go. I think, the idea of more of him, we pray this all the time. I want more of Jesus. Well, the way that works, it is it's the exchange life. So you're getting rid of yourself. So it's less of you. That's part of the equation we don't always kind of talk about it. It's less of you and we gain more of him in that exchange. And so there is that sense of kind of dying, like more of me, more of the old Rusty needed to go away, needed to die. And so, sermons and books and all these kind of things were coming just at the right time. And, but I do think that just kind of the circumstances, sitting in them and being kind of feeling like I was held in them were such that the learnings came, and, the deconstruction, if you will, or the less of me came and continues to happen. And there's, it feels like, just ask my wife, a long way to go. We could do with a lot less of Rusty today, there is that sense of like, I do want more joy and love and peace and patience and kindness and goodness. I want that. Why wouldn't we want that? Why wouldn't everyone in our lives want that?
Right.
But it comes at letting go of these things that we hold on to. And so for me, it was really, we did a lot of work in that period on me to where when I actually came into bigger roles, it just was so interesting because it just didn't hold this joy for me or this striving for me. I wasn't title driven outside of just like, okay, I have to steward this, so yes, I want the title because I want the opportunity to see God's kingdom come to 8,000 people. And I knew that there were these, opportunities that I had that I'd been put in a place to do it. And so, anyway, it just, hopefully that gets to some of it.
We hear so many different responses to resilience. I mean, because that's what it is that we're talking about here. You had an identity crisis. Your foundation, your framework of the world crumbled, and you took the responsibility, and you did. And I hear the commentary around 100% being God's, and it is. It's all His credit. But it also takes action on your part to put the work in. And I actually want to go back to C.S. Lewis's quote and read it in full because I've been struck by it a lot the last couple months. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is His megaphone to rouse a deaf world.
Amen.
Yeah. What is the relationship between, I'm going to give you 3 words, pain, ultimately an identity crisis of less of me, more of him, and resilience? Can you connect those 3 things together, Rusty?
I'll certainly give it a try.
I would love to hear it.
I think that, you read portions of scripture where you read about people like Paul or Peter being in chains and rejoicing. And it just sounds so foreign. We read it and we go, wow, like I would like a faith like that, and be careful what you pray for or hope for in that regard. Or you look back to, the journey of Joseph and kind of skim over, oh, he was in prison for 7 years. And you just, sometimes we skim past the suffering and struggle that formed 7 years, right? You just we get impatient in 7 minutes. If I'm in, some kind of situation where I'm just delayed, really, you're going to do that. You're going to be on your phone right now and pause while the light is green and, you're distracted driving. I'm going to, whatever. We just kind of blow a gasket on these small little things. But I think there's something in these writers and in these heroes of the faith that this eternal weight of glory, Paul calls it in 2 Corinthians 4. And it's this sense of like what's ahead is so much, we learn over time, it's so much more valuable than what we now will call these light momentary afflictions, that we can label it that way. So I do think resilience comes as you see the Lord be faithful over and over again. And maybe even as you experience more and more of the world, you taste what you thought was the fruit you wanted, or, achieve the thing that you wanted. And then it's like, how long does it take until it loses its luster? Right. I mean, everyone acknowledges that, like, oh yeah, well, now the meal has to be better, and the experience
even
has to be
professional
that
athletes, right?
Right.
I won the Super Bowl, and this is it. This is all it is.
Yeah.
Crazy.
The Tom Brady,
Yes.
from whichever Super Bowl that was, it was probably like his number 2nd. Is this as good as it gets? So I do think hopefully the younger you are, the more early you are in your faith or in your career, you can get this sooner. But oftentimes it's hard without pain, is because we just are wired for wanting more pleasure, wanting more recognition, wanting, whatever, finding our identity in these things that don't deliver at the end of the day. And so I do think some of the resilience comes as we learn these things, and we start, you suffer and you struggle, and, everything around us in our muscle systems. Think about how does a fruitful garden grow? Well, seeds that are planted that die, and they have to die. A seed can't become what it's supposed to be until it dies. If you took a seed and you hung it on the wall in a frame, it would literally just rot in front of you. It would rot to nothing, worthlessness. You have to put it in the ground and let it die.
Let it die
before it can become this potential of 100-fold. I just feel like it plays out in creation all around us.
But this is my question,
process,
which is that death, the pain that leads to that death. Can we become what we need, what God intends us to be without it? I mean, the answer I'm hearing you say is no. Quoting a mutual friend, Pete Oakes, God will humble you. And I'll use that where you can exchange that word humble for like, you will die to self, voluntarily or involuntarily.
Right.
And it's up to you to choose. How does someone choose that voluntarily without the failed business, Rusty, that you went through? I had such a similar experience that, well, it turns out my entire identity was tied up in the success of that company.
Yeah.
Without that, like, I never grow. I'm stunted. So that's what I'm really wrestling with these days, of how do we voluntarily choose that painful path?
Yeah. I think you hopefully listen to podcasts like this one, early in your career, and you kind of go, I hear these stories.
Yeah.
And you learn from others. It's not always,
that's good.
There's a saying out there about these different ways that we learn, and experience is the most bitter, is what Confucius would say. It's the most bitter way of gaining wisdom. But the easiest way is by by listening and learning from these people that have gone before us. And it's unfortunately, I definitely include myself in that mix. It's a smaller percentage that actually gain that resilience and wisdom, I think, from just kind of, I better sit at the feet of another who's gone before me, and seek that out even. I've been doing that more now in, the stages I'm entering in, as we're dealing with aging parents and parents that are, in their 80s and 90s. And man, those are rough seasons. So my wife and I are just like, okay, how do we avoid some of these things that seem kind of crazy to us as we watch, our parents do things. And hopefully I'm starting to meet with guys in their 70s. I'm almost 60. So I'm starting to meet with guys in their 70s who have gone through a career, or frankly, mid 60s, late to mid 70s is kind of where I find, I'm getting more and more people that, and I'll kind of have that coffee, and I got my 3 questions, and I may only get to one of them, but man, I'm going to get something.
Yeah.
And usually, when you ask and you pursue that, they'll make themselves available, because that's like, you were saying Pete Oakes, like he's another one of those guys. Like I sat next to him and for one dinner, and man,
so
I
much
wanna,
goodness.
can I follow you around?
Oh, that's so good.
So
wait, that quote was so good. I had to look it up. May I read the full quote of what you just said about learning?
Yeah, please get it right.
By three methods, we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, which is the most noble.
That's right.
Second, by imitation, which is the easiest. And third, by experience, which is the most bitter.
Right?
Yeah. That's going on that's going on the favorite quotes page. That's going on the favorite quotes page real quick.
We don't have to believe, his religion, but wow, that's truth.
That's truth.
That's just really, really good truth. And you see it play out.
So this identity thing, Rusty, I personally have a struggle with it. I think, when you're building business for a decade, book of business, entrepreneur, founder, executive team member, I think I just have a hard time with it, because, again, you're building this thing that's got a lot of your livelihood attached to it. Yep. So in your decades of experience and talking to other people too, they're even beyond you, like, how do you, like, what are some of the tangibles that you can do to get yourself out of like that rat race? Because again, you want to continue to be in build mode, but I just have a hard time with it personally. So I'm probably selfishly asking that question, but I know a lot of us deal with the same thing.
Yeah. Again, I think I go, but the Confucius quote comes to my mind, I guess, is to kind of be reflective about it. And I think to, do these things where you start numbering your days. You start realizing, okay, this, which seems like it's always been in our young selves, it's always been this way, and it always will be this way. And perhaps you just be reflective of playing it forward and kind of looking back and saying, this will come to an end at some point. And again, because I've been at KeHE for 20 plus years now, I see people leave, and the job of the organization is to move forward without them. It is if you've done your job well, when you leave, the organization will not need you. And it's so ironic, because we build this identity around, and then we are like, you've heard this before, but it's like pulling your hand out of a jar of water or a glass of water. Like it replaces you immediately. like really, the paint hasn't even dried on my, farewell poster or whatever. And I saw Brandon Barnholt model this incredibly well. He comes in to KeHE at about 500, 600 million. He grows it to 5 billion. He's really a founder in many ways. He's done several private equity deals. He's like, and he backed out of his office. I had to go find him. He was still CEO, but we had chosen a successor. He had already left his office, and I'm just like, boss, why aren't you in your? And I found him in some spare office in the KeHE buildings. And it had like some junk around there, like a standing desk part that was, it was like, who are you? And he just modeled, he modeled the exit well. And I think he kind of got some of these things well. So I saw it in him, Ryan. So it's not easy though. It is not easy, because particularly the circles that you all run in, and the kind of opportunities that wealth, kind of enables. It's really hard to not understand that you're in a bubble. I think the other thing for me, is I went, in 2009, I went for the first time to Honduras, and through an organization that I'm now on the board of, and I've gone dozens of times now, but this is a water project focused organization, and they bring teams from North America, and you go live in a community, a very, very remote community, for about 10 days. And you sleep in a hammock, you drink boiled water, you eat rice and beans. The idea is to immerse yourself, leaving behind if you will, emptying yourself, kind of a Philippians 2 model of this emptying of you in terms of what your comforts and your securities, and let them care for you while you go work alongside them and do life together. And, you share the gospel, you why are you there? Because God loves you, that kind of thing. These are people that have never in their lives gone more than 3 hours away from this these tiny communities, most of them. And so like the first time I did that was like a major, like, whoa, like what just happened to me? I came back, I was in chaos, just total chaos. And that's really been a helpful thing, to understand the bubble I'm in, to understand that my stuff isn't really that valuable at the end of the day to what matters to me, which are people's lives, my stuff, and, whatever leverage I have to get more stuff or to have cool stuff or go to do cool stuff. It's more about the relationship and the communities that you have. And, it's that old thing where, hey, we all went to Disney and the kids liked playing in the pool back, off property more than they did the $8
grand that we spent on this trip is not
exactly the dollars per minute. You're like, your head's exploding by how much we're spending on a second by second basis. And the kids love the pool off property better. It just like, and you hear that over and over again and you experience it. It's just so, I think reflect on those things and try to apply it to the here and now the best you can. Be with others who have that kingdom perspective. That remember, Jesus said that the kingdom is like this treasure buried in the field, that when it was discovered, this person with great joy sold all that he had to buy that field. That's the kingdom. So if we have that mindset, it does help these things that are shiny, that feel shiny, but you kind of see through them to go, no, these are temporal. This is not going to deliver the way these kingdom fruits will. So I do think you have to check yourself on what are you gazing on. Stop looking at your spreadsheet of how your investments are doing. Like just guard your heart, guard your time, guard your focus, because you can't stare at the dragon's gold, and not be kind of affected by the dragon. By the curse over the gold. Go watch Bilbo and Smaug, and that whole or Eustace, from C.S. Lewis's Dawn Treader, where Eustace turns into a dragon and Aslan has to take the skin off. That's an identity. That's a totally identity focused scene, and it's just really awesome.
It's really helpful.
One of the perspectives that I have grown to like is I think Jesse Itzler kind of coined it, but with your kids, it's like, okay, I have 16, summers left with my kids or whatever before they go to college. And I think when you start to quantify it in ways like that, for me, that's been a perspective shift of like, man, if I'm not executing on that kind of stuff, I'm missing the overarching point.
That's a really great perspective, and really, oftentimes too, you think about like they become juniors in high school, even sophomores, and it's all about friends, and you're kind of out of it, and so you may have even less, you have summers like you said, but just the ability to really, really be with your kids and influence them.
It's hard for us to believe.
Definite timer.
We're in the 3, 5, 7 stage. I'm like, that makes me so sad.
I'm just trying to get through bath time at this point. But,
totally, and all they want to do is be close to us. All they want to do is be like hanging on us, and then one day it's like your chopped liver. Goodness, I'm not ready for that.
Him though. Keep pursuing him. We moved up to Minnesota here in the fall, my wife and I, because our 3 adult kids are here, so we're still chasing them. I took my girls out to shop for my wife for Christmas.
That's so good, Rusty.
They were kind of turning back into their 3-year-old and 5-year-old selves, which
that's so
melted
sweet.
my heart.
I bet it
really
did.
Sweet.
I want to move us forward to so much good work that you did while running HR and the foundation in the context of KeHE. And I want to frame it really open-ended because I want to see where you take it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and perhaps the most important lessons you learned about leadership in the context of HR for a company that's 10xing over the course of a few years. I mean, that's rocket ship growth for an
Yeah.
already very significant organization. And you're there running the people side of the business. Man, what did you learn?
It's I tend to in these kind of discussions go biblical, and I don't mean to be trying to be Bible man about all of this, but it really what I mean, like, it's just there's so much great content around how to build culture, and we did lots of we engaged KeHE deeply, we engaged the table group, we immerse ourselves in some of the great thinking around how to be better leaders. And I think that's all critical. Those are all critical pieces. What I would say for me personally, and how God moved in what I think was a unique way, was he and some of that was really fired into existence through these immersive radical serving experiences that just rocked my world, where I started asking myself, okay, what's in my hands? What do I have leverage over? What do I have responsibility to steward? And it felt like all of these people that are entrusting their careers to KeHE distributors. Okay. Well, so how did they experience the kingdom? If my role is for God's kingdom to come in me and then through me, and what I'm stewarding in that moment is culture, then what is it? How does kingdom culture look? And it was clear to me what it's not is Bible studies and baptisms, right? That's not, because we tend to go like Christian, and I'm going to sound negative for a moment. I don't mean to be, because obviously we want to see people have regenerated hearts and to have eternal relationship with Jesus. That's what we desire, that. But we have this responsibility, and even Jesus spoke these words in Luke 4 about, he quoted Isaiah 61, that the blind would receive sight, that those that are in captivity would be freed, that the ancient ruins would be restored, that people that are mourning be wrapped in a garment of praise, and on and on. This beautiful language of people experiencing what we might define today and describe more like flourishing, or he said in John 10:10, abundant life. That this is why I came, that you would have life and have it abundantly. And so, how does that show up in a work? How does that show up in a culture? And again, you only have so many things that you can do, and even in a role where I had a lot of influence, you don't really have. It's like a battleship at times. You're trying to steer it a certain way, and you're not really able to influence that much. And so for me, it came down to the ways. And I think I was at a GLS, and I heard this, that it's every manager every day. And that phrase really kind of stuck with me, is that, okay, that when people come into work and you do all the engagement work and you find out, well, people leave bad leaders. They don't lead first before they lead organizations, right? They leave the manager because of how that leader is leading. And so I felt like my role was, how can I have leaders lead in the most kind of loving, joy-filled ways possible. And that the opposite of that, and the frequent way of leading, was more toxic. It's out of fear and shame, typically. And so when leaders lead from that place, we all feel it. It's dysfunctional. Like we'll say, oh, my manager is narcissistic, or, we'll have these titles they need counseling. That's why I got them for Christmas. I got them counseling sessions. Well, it's true. We all, do at some levels, because we need to heal from the trauma that we've experienced at some place along the way. And so the objective then became, how do we make our leaders whole and integrated people? Because out of that wholeness, then their leadership has a better chance of looking more kingdom-like. And not that you wait for them to get to some perfect state, but you do kind of, we have some crash course programs that we put people through. Trust was a big one. And so there's lots of ways to get a trust, and how to earn trust. I think KeHE and the trust work they've done is amazing and so good, so practical. Just very implementable. You can implement it at scale. Like, this is something, whether you're 100,000 or frankly, you're 50 employees. This is something that you can definitely implement. There's systems and definitions, and it can wire up to recruitment systems and performance systems and succession. And so that's the next thing you do. Once you have these values and these ways of behaving, then they have to wire up to these talent systems that allow it to be, more than just an event. 'Cause
Right.
It needs to be
It's accountability
all
at
day
the end of the
long.
day, right?
It is. And so we have performance discussions. And if that doesn't link up to your kingdom thinking, if it's just, oh, hey, we love this performance book we read. And so even the language you use, the terms to describe what great looks like at your company needs to be held up to this vision of wholeness from a leader perspective. And
Mhm.
I think
It's really interesting.
I don't think leaders, particularly in faith-centered organizations, I don't think they're passionate enough about this. I think they get really passionate about giving, and I love that. That's awesome.
Passionate about
what's the-
what? Be specific.
Like giving, passionate about what is the experience of the employees that came into work yesterday under my authority? What was their experience like? Did it bring them closer to, kind of a kingdom experience that I'm accountable for, or
Right.
further away? Would they go home with more in their emotional tank than when they came? Or did I just drain every ounce? And I called it Christian because we gave away 10%. And
Goodness.
again, that sounds
And then guess
that sounds harsh.
Guess who suffers back home, right? Because if you don't
Well,
have it, you
right.
can't give it, right? If your tank's on empty.
Right. It's the kids, and the spouses and the communities, they go home. There's a ripple effect for
Yes.
sure. And the opposite might be true. If you think about multiplying your impact and you do it through employees that go home, that yes, we're holding them to a performance standard, but they know that they're loved. They know that you, even if you had to, even if you have to let people go, that you're doing it in a relationally connected way that's not shaming them, that's saying this is what we're doing, and you're, it's not reflective of who you are as a human. So anyway, I think the way people are treated and having it be systematic in your succession, your talent attraction or acquisition, and your kind of your performance systems they just need to be aligned to that kind of perspective. That's what we ended up doing, is we discovered, kind of these ways of leading and these ways of running teams that were more kingdom aligned, and we began to put the right language around it that reinforced what you might call more of a redemptive leadership, I think, is how Praxis might describe it.
Rusty, how do you, as a faith-based leadership, all things like that, how do you find the balance between that component, which is obviously very important? I know us three would share in that, and just like getting like results as a business,
Getting stuff done.
profitability, getting stuff done. Exactly.
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
I think it's really difficult. I don't think that, I think we use a lot of analogies and comparisons and systems, and you're not competing to lose the Super Bowl, you're competing to win the Super Bowl. And in our case, we're a faith-founded company, but we're secular in our makeup, and we're agnostic, atheist, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, keep going, right? Protestant, Catholic, and every, and then all the strata under there. So we're a mosaic. And so what we focused on is how as I said before, just this way of people being treated, this expectation for, the baseline is civility, that everyone that comes in will be treated with dignity and respect. And if a manager does not hold that to be true, they can lose their jobs. And this is like a zero tolerance thing, that you're treating your team with dignity and respect. To me, some people go, oh man, that's a high goal. I feel like that's a baseline. Like that's a baseline.
Yeah.
And now we're going for love. What does it look like for me to lead and again, we've got our KPIs, we've got our competitive matrix, we have all these things that are driving towards success, but you can't burn through people to do that. So I think that's where, and for a leader especially, you're going to have to bear that weight a bit to say, how do I create shalom when we're in a time of stress? How do we do that? How do we model, the playbook of life kind of thing, this sense of rest and Sabbath, and hey, I want to lead at the pace of Jesus. That's kind of what I want to do. And he got a lot done in 3 years. Turns out he changed the world.
Turns out
with 12,
pretty quick.
He was effective. And we're still telling the stories. We're telling the stories, and we're gazing on him, and we're like, wow, the perfect God, the perfect man.
Indeed.
And so
the perfect leader. Yeah, indeed.
Perfect leader. Yeah. So I just think we shouldn't. Oh yeah, but he didn't have his marketplace being disrupted by TikTok or by DeepSeek or by you name it, right? All these things that are flying at us.
That's so good.
But I heard last week, Barry Rowan is a leader I hadn't really been aware of. He's written a book, and man, he's talking about this abiding, like doing strat plans from a place of abiding, and kind of what a pain is a bit what you're asking, Ryan, that we hold these two things because we're in the world, but we're not of it. And so we're in the marketplace, we're competing, we want to build a great company. And I think as you guard your gaze and you make sure that, these image bearers never get diminished into something less. I think then in the moment, you're called to make these tough decisions, and you got to make them.
This is our podcast, so I get to ask selfish questions.
Nice.
This isn't one of those like asking for a friend things. This is asking for me. How has your thinking evolved on being liked as a leader over your time at KeHE?
You just pushed at kind of my Achilles, probably my squishy part.
Well, it's coming from a place of deep Achilles pain over here as well. Right. I promise.
I'm the God made me to be an encourager and a visionary, and I bring teams together and high performing teams and unify those teams. Those are things I do well. I think where I'm criticized, where my feedback comes from my teams are they want to know how to win. They want clarity on how to win, and they want me to lead in a way where I'm not, I don't know if I would say try being liked or be just like you're not, that you're on the team, but you're separate from the team too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I do find that to be difficult. I think it's good to do, the assessments and get feedback and just kind of have that in front of you, so your self-awareness hopefully could lead to some practical steps on,
right.
Okay, when I'm doing performance reviews, or even just, when I'm having my one-on-ones on a weekly basis, hopefully those are the places where we're going to have a tough conversation right now. I'm just going to let you know and practice it if you have to, write it out and do that work, get language. One of the reasons I love Speed of Trust at KeHE is he has 13 trust behaviors, and they're on cards. They have all this language. And so sometimes I'll have in front of me several different card decks with the language that is loving, but is firm about where somebody is missing on a performance metric, that they're not this or that. And I've worked with family, I've worked with some of my best friends. So it's difficult when you have that, you have to give that message to those individuals. But I think get prep for it. I think the other thing is, so God's called you to a mission, and you, especially as that senior leader of that mission, you're stewarding that, and you need to be a gentle protector, kind of what the rare thinking would call this elder, and you're in that seat, and so in that seat you have responsibilities, and that responsibility is you're shepherding not just the one person that you're feeling like, oh, I want them to like me, or I don't want to have a tough conversation with them because they might not like me or whatever. Or, they're going to think I'm not kind, or I just don't like it. I don't want to do it because it's not me. I think it's motivating to think about not just that one person, but their team and then the broader team. And in your case, you've got stakeholders and shareholders that obviously are, and I do as well. I've got these donors. I've got 8,000 employees that work hard every day. And to the extent that we are their impact arm to the world, I feel significant accountability about that.
Right.
And so it does bring some motivation to go, okay,
Right.
I can't let this stand. This particular thing needs to get better. And that person's in that seat. And so it's on me. I need to lead them through this.
That's interesting. It kind of speaks to the motivation.
Yes.
Of why
it does.
If the motivation is purely, am I going to be successful? How am I going to look? Like, you probably won't have those challenging conversations, but that's
right.
That's really good. Interesting. So if I heard you correctly, the answer is you have to be prepared not to be liked.
Yes.
And I've heard one of my new favorite quotes, Ryan, I'll have heard this for the 5th time, is the grass isn't greener on the other side. The grass is greener over the septic tank. We got to go find the septic tank.
Yeah,
we got to deal with it, right? And that's I think it's true of every organization, big or small. We're broken people. There's always going to be those issues. And so putting in the work and finding the challenging aspects of that work, I think, is the leader's job.
The other thing on that too is we're kind of fooling ourselves about the being liked thing, because sometimes we wait to when you have to, probably the hardest is when you have to let somebody go for performance reasons, and you wait on that, or you give them 9 lives. So you're trying to redeem that situation, that person, and everyone around them suffering. And so you're actually not very liked, because the people around that person knows that they report to you and that's your responsibility. So when you do make that call, and again, do it lovingly, do it kindly, but you make it, and that person exits the organization. What has happened in my career is that you get more not that that's why you do it, but it's just the irony, or frankly, the lie that's embedded in that the pursuit of being liked,
right?
Is actually the thing we actually were being steered by, was a lie itself. It didn't deliver. It didn't deliver.
Good. That's really good. Man. So KeHE Cares Foundation now, full time. You're running it. You're innovating and thinking about new things. You talked about being kind of that visionary. Where do you hope this all goes in the next 5 to 10 years? What will KeHE Cares be responsible for that, if you were not at the helm of this organization, it otherwise would not happen?
Yeah, that's good. I think that we're potentially a model for particularly larger organizations, where it's one thing if you have 100 employees, which is a lot, and I get that, but you still, especially if you're a CEO or founder that has a strong faith element, you have a lot of influence over every single employee, every single one of them, and above that number, and really at that number too, but certainly above that number, that influence just shrinks. So it has to be about systems and about how do you grow these leadership benches and all of these other aspects. And over time, as the founder leaves, the threat of mission drift is huge. And one of my hopes has been that KeHE Cares is this 501c3 with a separate board, and yet it's attached to KeHE. And it continues to influence. We continue to have our leadership academy that sits in the 501c3 lead and host serving experiences and events and all kinds of stuff that influence all of the 710 leaders that lead people at KeHE. And so there's a sense of, okay, how do you do at scale? How do you do giving? And you're involving all these employees, and it's not just the founder making all the decisions. And how do you do serving? It's not just local that, wow, we've got, we have had over almost 3,000 employees now go on multi-day serving experiences. And so
3,000.
That's amazing.
So the hope that I have is that there's this sustainability, that it's so not about me, not about me, that, that I'm people on my back is the image I have. Like, okay, this is that I'm doing some blood on the beach work. I'm doing some foundation. I want the pylons to go really deep, and the rhythms and the practices, even I view my foundation team like a ministry team. So I've been studying, well, how does IJM, how do they set up the culture at International Justice Mission? How do these great nonprofits do what they do? Hope International, how are they doing what they do? Well, prayer, huge. I mean, that's like, and I think that's true of anybody. Like, you guys ought to be on your knees, more than you are. And I need to be out more than maybe you are enough. I'm certainly convicted that, man, this is something I suck at. And God just moves in that. And you like, why wouldn't I? It's dumb. It's just dumb. But to set up the organization so that it doesn't, there's nothing about me in it, that it's about like what we're doing and how we're doing it in these systems and processes.
And Rusty, if I want to just kind of make sure I heard the essence of that, which is creating a sustainable model for organizational development of thriving leaders. Is that what it is?
Yeah, and it is, and I think that there's when you blend together stewardship and like financial as well as people stewardship with kind of what you might call HR practices, I'd call them more talent practices. When you blend those things together, there's a unique set of things that happen that are easily lost from one leadership regime to the next, because each CEO has their own leadership program. They have their own way of doing things. So we could be one CEO away at KeHE from all this cool stuff just becoming, a white paper and something that, I still talk about, at my family gatherings or whatever. So, if you want it to be impactful, I think this model of having this 501c3 that has some separateness to it, that can have some more continuity, can be more mission-ol, and way deeper in the mission. I think that's going to bring some continuity from one regime to the next, if you will, that one generation to the next.
Yeah, it's good.
The other thing that I'm really excited about is just I feel like we have this opportunity to influence other organizations, and that's still that's still kind of being formed and unfurling around us. And there, some of those things are in how leaders are cared for. Some of those things are frankly just how do you set up a culture of serving and generosity and wholeness? And are there organizations out there? Are there kind of gatherings out there that can be really practical? How do I do that? Because there isn't, is the answer. There are gatherings out there that are for founders who maybe have family offices, or they've had a liquidity event, and now what do I do with my capital? And there are lots of really great engagement points for those people. But what happens is they hire a stewardship person or a head of HR, and they kind of hand over the jewels to them. The jewels meaning these image bearers that as you grow, especially, it's just more and more critical that the way that they're cared for in the midst of high performance expectations and the experience that they have of the kingdom, that's what I, again, want to see other organizations start to kind of grab onto that vision, and just some practical. I'd love to have, more kind of third-party vetted metrics on what does Fulbright serving look like? What does Fulbright giving look like? Well, I give 10%. Okay, is that Fulbright? And I would say no. Are your employees involved? Okay, you're down. How are you involved relationally with where you're like, there's some things that would kind of maybe help a company to say, oh, I'm only at a 2. Man, like, I'm going to close that gap. And so we're trying to form with some other organizations that kind of maybe unified kind of metrics around what a great serving organization looks like, what a great what a generous company looks like, and what a company that has wholeness and how its leaders are formed. So that's kind of
it's really
we'll
beautiful.
see where, again,
I'm
available and obedient, and God's got to move, because that's a way bigger thing than.
Well, as Ryan said right as we started, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, right? So those are things we don't measure right now. That's really energizing, Rusty. That's cool.
So Rusty, as we wrap here, if you were to give your younger self, advice 20, 30 years ago, whether it be habits or career, whatever it may be, what would you tell yourself?
Well, I go back and listen to the resilience podcast that Mark and Ryan are putting together, because they have all these stories and this treasure trove right in front of you. So
we wish.
Go back and spend some time.
That's good.
Doing that. I think some of the identity discussion we had is just around. I used to play pickup basketball all the time. I mean, just for years and years of it. Loved it. Lots of bent fingers and damaged body parts from that. Don't do it anymore, unfortunately. But you'd have these old guys step on the court, and in my prideful youth, I would eye them up and go, "I'm just going to demolish this old guy. Like he just didn't have he can barely get his feet off the ground." That's me now, by the way. That's me. And it would be weird because at the end of the game, like they would win and the guy would, get his shots, and just like I would be exhausted. He'd kind of be like ready for game 2.
That's so true.
And it was just this learning of like they had figured out the right pace to operate. Like they had figured out what's most important, like which fakes to go for and which just kind of let go. And they just had a way of moving that was more efficient in a way. And just had gained wisdom. And I think I would just, I would try to talk to myself about those kind of things, to try to sort out, what's important. And, make sure you're taking advantage of the relationships you have and really pour out. You get more back than you think when you're pouring out. And so sometimes we have a scarcity mindset, and I think you can be more generous pouring out, be more, have a abundance mindset, that there's plenty to go around. We're connected to the infinite source. And as we do that, we just, we can, and to not pour out for us to miss out on some things. So I think I would just try to be like the old man in basketball, a little bit more in my life and like settle down on some things and just, and then maybe, pour in and go deeper on some other things.
Yeah, it's awesome. The right pace to operate at. Something
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Something I need to learn for sure. Well, Rusty, thanks for spending some time with us. These insights are super valuable to us, and I know they'll be valuable to others. So we appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks for you guys for doing this. This is awesome, and I appreciate the time to be with you. What a blessing.
It's a journey, so we appreciate you being a part of it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rusty.
Amen. Yeah. See you guys.
Thanks for engaging with this episode of the Masters of Resilience podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend or colleague. Stay up to date on all the latest episodes and get exclusive resources at mastersofresilience.com. We'll see you next time.